You're good to go.
Oh, Tony, you're muted.
Sorry about that. Thanks. I think we've got everything ready to go now. Okay. Thanks, Lynn Ann. Thanks, Corey. Welcome, everyone. It's good to see all of you. I recognize some names. We appreciate you being here with us today. I am Tony DeFranco. I'm the Director of Operations for SUNY OER Services. I work with faculty and staff to help them adopt, scale, and sustain OER initiatives on their campuses. I also work closely with technology support and online learning leaders in supporting them around OER related platforms and technology. Joining me today, Rebecca Harrington. Rebecca is a health educator at SUNY Oneonta. She developed sexual and interpersonal violence content, which was branded as Spark, and that was distributed by SUNY. She's done a lot of work actually within SUNY. Hundreds of campuses across the country are actually using derivatives of her work. She's also contributed to the development of a mental health online program called WellStart. This is something that was developed in the OLI platform, and that resource is available on the SUNY OER Services Ready to Adopt catalog, which we'll talk about in just a bit. And also Greg Bunye, he's learning engineer at Carnegie Mellon's Open Learning Initiative, the OLI. He helps educators across the globe develop evidence-based courses with a focus on continuous improvement. And an interesting fact about Greg, he's an alum of University at Buffalo and of course, Carnegie Mellon's Masters of Education Technology program. So we're pleased to have both of them with us today. Here's a look at the items that we'll cover this hour. We'll provide an overview of the OER Services OLI partnership and what that means for you, your students, and your campuses. We have over 120 ready to adopt courses in the SUNY catalog that I mentioned. We'll show you where to access those courses and some other resources. And again, Rebecca, who's a health educator at SUNY Oneonta, will provide an overview of the alcohol education course she developed using the OLI adaptive learning platform. And by the way, that course is not yet on the catalog. We expect that to be added sometime over the summer, and we'll certainly let you know when that happens. We will take your questions. If you want to post your questions in the chat, we will respond to those as we're able. We will also respond to those questions at the end of the chat as well, especially if they're questions for Rebecca as she talks about the process she's been involved with in developing this material. Just a little background about the OER services. We're part of the Office of Library and Information Services and part of the larger digital innovation and academic services area of SUNY. We're a shared services organization for campuses that are looking to build, support, and expand open educational programs and practices. Our focus is on lowering costs for students, but also improving teaching and learning, and of course, empowering faculty to use course materials that they feel are best suited to their needs. We utilize a number of resources, internal as well as external. We have a large network of partners. This has really helped us to have a major impact on scaling OER use across the system. Again, our overall goal with these platforms and partnerships is to increase student success. We're able to provide these critical supports and offerings by leveraging the internal services in SUNY, such as help desk support. Many of you here may utilize their support services for your learning management system or for online learning. We utilize SUNY Center for Professional Development for organizing and managing various training and development programs, much like this one today, for showcasing some of the materials that we've got and some of the work that's going into this. SUNY Press, they provide publishing and print services. And of course, our key external partners like the Open Learning Initiative at Carnegie Mellon University and Lumen Learning both provide low-cost digital courseware that use OER. And the content they provide is accessible and meets SUNY EIT policy. Our work with our partners has demonstrated that OER really is much more than just about the content. When we first started off, it was really focused on using openly licensed content, sharing the content, and keeping costs down. But we've really seen over the years that it's helped faculty think about how they want to reshape their courses and how campuses can shift culture and sustain that change. This is a snapshot of how OER has scaled across the system just over the past 6 years. Over 735,000 SUNY students have been enrolled in at least one OER course. Over 2,600 faculty teach with OER in SUNY, and there are over 21,000 OER course sections. And since the formation of OER services and initial funding from New York State, students and families have saved over $79 million in course material costs. So pretty impressive numbers. Our Ready to Adopt catalog can be found at oer.suny.edu. And if Corey hasn't already done that, if she wouldn't mind sharing that link, we would appreciate it. It features over 120 high quality OER courses, along with additional resources and modules that are called sidecars. And a lot of times these are used as supplements to other courses. Many of these offerings are from OLI and include the alcohol education course, or will include the alcohol education course when we get it to the catalog. The courses are developed in alignment with the SUNY Online Course Quality Review rubric, or as some of you may know, OSCAR. The courses integrate seamlessly in your LMS, and they're available, of course, at no cost to SUNY students and faculty through our partnership with OLI. To review or adopt a course, simply go to the link oer.suny.edu, select the course you want, and then fill out and submit the Explore This course form. At this time, I'm going to hand off to Rebecca so she can talk about the course and the process she was involved with in designing using the OLI platform. And then I'll stop my share. Rebecca? I think you are also on mute. Rebecca, you're still on mute. Okay.
There we go. Now you can hear me. I think I've got my display settings backwards, but I don't know if we're gonna see if that helps. That seems to be a little bit better.
That looks backward on our end.
Okay, I'll go back.
You had it correctly.
It's better before. Okay.
Yeah.
I have 3 monitors and I wasn't sure how it was going to go.
Looks good.
Okay. So I recognize a lot of names out there from the folks in my world. So it's really cool to see you all there and fun to bring you into this space where I've been playing and making some new friends along the way. So I chose this image to start with. I want to talk about alcohol education, and that's mostly what we're going to be getting into here. But for a period of time before the pandemic, I was running a social media feed called Lego Health Educator, and I was building these sets to set up to do these little brief educational things on Instagram and Facebook. And the night I got the bar built, my son set this up. He was 10 at the time when he created this late night version of the bar scene, and he's the son of a health educator. So I thought I'd been doing a pretty good job at screening what his information was. But by the age of 10, he had absorbed enough content from media that he knew how to set up a bar scene for his mom, who was going to do some education. And I think that really got, like we stumble upon these moments that really change how we think about how we do our jobs or about how we live our lives. And it was like, whoa, like if he's absorbed this much at 10, what has the average 18-year-old absorbed as they're walking into the front doors of our building? So that was kind of a moment of kind of pause and stop. And Tony did a really great introduction of connecting me to the person behind the SUNY Spark. I was part of the team in 2016 that came together and said, hey, like we should be able to figure this out, right? Like we can make our own thing and walk away. And when I was at that meeting in 2016 in March in Albany, I remember thinking a couple of things that there was no way I could walk away from a third-party vendor for sexual assault content because I was always going to need to have alcohol content. So the likelihood of needing to create both courses was a solid necessity. I also volunteer, like, I don't know, like that. I just knew that I was walking into that meeting and I was going to volunteer for something big. And I didn't realize what a life-changing meeting that was going to be. But by the end of that meeting, I had volunteered to learn Articulate Storyline that I knew nothing of prior to walking into that meeting on that day in March. And Articulate Storyline became the software program that we used to build this. And Party Science, I think SUNY did create the opportunity for folks to download what SUNY branded as Track. This was my original logo for Party Science, which is what I call it on my campus. there was a little freak out about Breaking Bad and like what that logo kind of looked like. I have a sister who's a PhD in chemistry, so I was like, oh, it's my homage to her. So, we make it happen. We launch it. I go through endless nights of insomnia, like worrying and worrying and worrying. I get connected with my learning technology folks on campus. I ask them questions. I have no idea what they're saying. They're speaking a whole other language, but they smile and nod and give me positive body language. I'm like, okay, they know the answer to this question. We'll figure it out when the time comes. And we get through it. We get through the first year. It was shaky and scary, but we survived. And, we go into year 2 and I kind of continue to tweak and change. And at this point, SUNY is distributing Spark on a more broad basis. We're doing some research about people are struggling with learning Articulate Storyline to adapt it for themselves. And my trainer at the gym says I overthink things. I said, I reframe that as overthinking is my superpower. I think education is the right place for me to be because it's a space where overthinking is positively reinforced. How do I make it better? What's not going right? What was I thinking when I said yes? Those kinds of things. And so here's kind of where my thoughts solidified after going through a couple years of having this content that I developed myself. I was saving a lot of money by not using a third-party vendor. When we built our original alcohol class, which, this is what you're going to see today is just a further derivative work. I baked a lot of stuff and I brought it into my counseling center conference room. And I just invited folks from across campus, like, come here, tell me your thoughts on these things. How does alcohol impact your role on campus? And you can come and have free baked goodies that I made myself. And everybody showed up. A lot like folks from University Police, they came and we made jokes about the baked goods, but they showed up and they came. We had a really great conversation. So it was the first time I really felt I had a complete idea of how alcohol was impacting not only our students, but the various places where they're intersecting. We also found out because a lot of the education that we're giving our sanctioned students, and for those of you who are in the OER, more tech side of things, students who get in trouble on our campuses, depending on the severity of the issue, they're often being mandated to come in for an educational sanction. And so we had baked a lot of the education from those courses into the online course now for incoming students. And we found out we now had to change the sanctioned student course because they knew the content already. So they were learning that stuff. So we're absorbing something. We were getting some feedback on that level. I really learned that I love Articulate Storyline, and I've used it in a bunch of different things at this point. And I was really excited because I got exactly what I wanted from it. But there's also a downside with all of those things. Updating and testing is a lot of work. I'm a 10-month person. I was almost always giving up a few weeks of summer vacation at this point to make sure things were ready to go because of the timing of August. You start every academic year with running a MOOC for a lot of students, some years as many as 1,800 for me. And these are students who are using their learning management system for the first time. So there's a lot of bumps in the road. I was also kind of being in the space too, where I was being asked to take mandated trainings by my own campus and recognizing that if it's something you're not really engaged in, it's really easy to just turn the volume off and click your way through and take the quiz at the end and be like, okay, I did the training. And that's where I was really starting to I was struggling, right? So, and again, my primary lens at that point was really the sexual violence stuff. Like, I'm passionate about the work that we need to put in because we need to end, it's a social justice issue. We need to bring an end to these crimes. And we're just checking this box. Are we really getting students to learn? Because in the public health sphere, we need knowledge, but we need knowledge to change attitudes. We need attitudes to change behavior. And that's really the end goal. So how does this all connect? And where higher education is checking a box, just say we presented somebody this information good enough. And so these are really kind of like, I'm going through the motions. I'm still like, okay, we're saving money. We're doing that. PreventConnect.org is a sexual violence prevention group. And I think, this was really nice to see this published by them because it really reflected what I was saying. What are the drawbacks? What are the benefits? And I do think, for those of us who are the ones on campus, on the ground during orientation, we're doing these large group experiences. I think it's still really easy for somebody to check out or tune out in a 500 student lecture hall experience, especially when it's bookended all day through multiple things. So does it replace in person? Well, it doesn't replace an in-person, small group experience, but does it replace like the 500 seat theater kind of experience? I think there's a swap there. And at that point, there was no evidence of effectiveness. And so this was new stuff for folks. Oh, I got too far. So, my final takeaways on all of this, and I love Oprah. I don't choose her to be pushing a rock uphill as far the negative connotation, but folks will tell you once you develop an online course, it is your child and it's yours to take care of forever. And that's kind of like one of the inside jokes of all of it. But really where I came through is I love that I can deliver the content that my campus needs. I have the flow, I can dose. So the experience now for my students is they get the messages that I have designed for them to get in August before they come to campus, which immediately flows into what they get in their in-person orientation experience, which is then followed up by some other in-person short intervention table style events that we follow up with. I have the ability to update on an annual basis. So like right now, those of us in the education world are hearing a lot about Borgs, like note to self, like next August version of this course is going to have some content about Borgs. For those of you who are not familiar with Borgs, it's not the Star Trek Borg. It's a 1-gallon jug of lots of alcohol. And so I think for me, I've just I'd kind of come to terms with like, okay, there's more good than negative with this. And I can live with that on a moral, ethical, like how I want to change the world to be a better place level. And then in 2019, I happened to just stumble upon a posting on the American College Health Association's listserv that they were looking to recruit some folks to help them develop an online mental health program, which Tony mentioned earlier. It's the Well Start program, and it's already available on the SUNY catalog. So if you're a SUNY campus, there are several mental health modules that are already available for your campus to be using for free. They're ready to go. So I get connected with them in 2019. And then, the world changed shortly after we began meeting in the summer of 2019. And I think it was summer of 2021, we were recognizing that the money that had been granted to the American College Health Association to create this program and deliver this program was not going to be enough to purchase an LMS. And we started kind of sniffing around, like, what are our ways that we're developing this content? We need a vehicle to allow us to mass distribute this and collect some data. And I actually reached out to Ed Beck, who is a SUNY Oneonta colleague who also works with Tony and does some other stuff for SUNY system. And he's like, hey, sounds like you need to call the folks over at OLI. And I'm like, all right, what's an OLI? We'll find. So pass the information up to the project manager and we start having these meetings and they start showing me their platform. And I think my eyes got really big because this was finally like, this was the Rosetta Stone. This is what I needed to do to figure things out. So once again, I found myself in a meeting. I'm like, yeah, I'm probably going to be the one that volunteers to learn this thing and figure it out and do the building of this. And so over the winter of 21-22, we got the Well Start course built and we started doing some pilot programs, and there's still pilot program availability at this point for folks. So if you're happen to be here and you're not within the SUNY system, we might still be able to get you in the Well Start pilot for the fall. So reach out, please. So here's our Well Start content. And so now I've got this extra experience and I want to talk a little bit about Open Learning Initiative. I wasn't sure if Greg was going to be able to make it today, but I feel like I've heard his spiel a little bit. So for those of you who are new, the Open Learning Initiative is based out of Carnegie Mellon. It came into being around the same time as edX and Coursera, which, some of the other big colleges were connected to that. But right from the get-go, when they launched, they were very interested in measuring learning. I think for me, it's like, oh, but it's also the home of Mr. Rogers. So clearly everything at Carnegie Mellon is awesome. So this is their whole goal. Their whole platform is how do we design stuff so that it's set up in a way that we can continuously make it better. And they have this really lovely graphic about like, we think we know what we want, we build it, we push it out there, we look at the data on the back end. What did we get right? What did we get wrong? Let's ask some questions. Let's put some updates in there. And we just continue to run through that little bit of a figure eight there. And, connecting with students. So they're constantly using what the data they're getting to drive the platform experience. There's a big platform, like some of the screenshots you're going to see today are from their old platform. We'll be pushing content out in the fall on their newer platform, which has a little bit different user experience. But you get to watch all of these different things take place in real time. And it's just it's a 180 from what you might be used to if you've used other stuff. So the process of moving. So I was assigned a learning engineer. Greg was my learning engineer. He mentored me through the whole WellStart thing. And as we were going through WellStart, I was like, I have this alcohol class. I have this sexual violence prevention class. I think I want to move them over onto your platform. And now I've been through the process once with this other content. I have some ideas about how I would do that. And I had also in the back been like, I think it's time for like a critical revision of a lot of things. And I think those of us who were in higher ed pre-pandemic, during the pandemic, post-pandemic, things are just critically different at this point. And so I had the time last year to really start getting into it. And like I said, I had originally built Spark, that I was continuing to make my own version of Spark each year for my students, as well as this party science course. And I had built them both in Articulate Storyline, which lets you export out to a Word document. You get pictures of all the slides, you get all of the content. I printed them out and I handed them over to 2 students. I gave the sexual assault content to one student who she was interning with me, and also our student association president. And she was a human ecology major, so she's in social work grad school right now at Columbia. And the alcohol course I gave to a psychology student who's also in grad school pursuing a therapy degree. Gave them each a red pen, said, circle what you like, X out what you hate, tell me what's missing, like let's just get in there. So we started with that and getting some real student feedback. And we talked about what would they want the content to be. And they both were in agreement that they wanted content to be available as both video and readable, so that students could have a choice as to how they navigated content. So we moved it into a Word doc. We started, we copied over the text that we were keeping. We started leaving placeholders for things we wanted to add. They started doing some research on that content. And then what you see on the screen on the right is what it started to look like on the back end of the build for the Open Learning Initiative. So the first thing you do when you're building these courses is you figure out what all your learning objectives are. So you go, you pull out your Bloom's taxonomy wheel, you start thinking about how all these things frame out. And so you start by, what are my learning objectives? What do I want students to learn? And how are we going to measure that through assessment? So we're building pages. Every page of content must be mapped to a learning objective. Within a learning objective, we have what we would, their language is skills. So what you can see there, and my screenshots of the build are all around on-campus and off-campus expectations. So you can see I have defined on and off campus expectations as a learning objective. And then the skills that are nested under that are on campus expectations and off campus expectations. And then as we start to write the questions that we're going to use to measure whether students are learning, every time you write a question, you tell it what skill it connects with. And so you get these really lovely charts that get built on the back end. So I can see that for on-campus expectations, I have 2 questions, those little green little chemistry, I forget what the chemistry term is for like the neural, I don't know. There's a special name for those little triangle shaped files. So that tells me I have a formative assessment. Formative assessment means a student gets kind of like a practice question so they can test themselves, and it doesn't, count for anything other than a test yourself. And then we have those nice little purple check marks to show us that it shows up in a quiz somewhere. So every little something that goes into this course has a practical reason for being there. And then for our students, so what you can see now is on this little, I think you can probably see my little mouse arrow. So I have all my modules for my party science course. And then on this party social and cultural influences. And so I've separated out, and we're going to look at all the learning objectives in just a few slides. So these are all the pages that make up that module. And what I ultimately decided to do was really one learning objective per page. So students can kind of go through stuff quick. So it feels like you're moving through stuff. And then this is on the bottom right here. You can see what it looks like on the back end. So as you're designing this content, almost like a WordPress site. Like there's a little text button. I need to add text. I click the text button and I get a little text box and I can copy and cut paste. If I want to add a video, there's a little, it's hard to see, there's a little YouTube icon. So all these videos actually exist on a YouTube page, and then I've just clicked in those links. So it's very easy to build. You just gather all your content and plunk it in, add it in. I can text edit within, and everything's all right there. For my students, this is what it looks like for them. We were still on Blackboard. We're not into the D2L migration yet at SUNY Oneonta. That will be this summer's project, is moving this over. The other reason I was really motivated to do this is any course that's on the OLI platform will work with whatever LMS you have. So I knew I was going to have to change something no matter what. Like there was a hard date when Blackboard was going away from my campus. So I got all the content into OLI, and now I'm like kind of LMS proof. Whatever SUNY decides to do next, whatever Oneonta decides to do next in terms of LMS, we just have to do a phone call and make the information come together. So this is our Blackboard page for our students. There's their little directions for what they're going to do. They click the Party Science and Spark link, and then it brings them to a page at the Open Learning Initiative. So they click through. SUNY has their own server somewhere in the Carnegie Mellon area land. We flow the students over there where the information lives. And they're given these very simple icons. They click the syllabus one, and then they click into right here, and it starts taking them right through the content and remembers where they left off. And here's what it is for the students when they finally reach that final content. So we have a very clear, again, really great graphic user interface for students to go through the content, right down the page. And then what doesn't show up on this is there's these really nice big next arrows. So to go from one page to the next, it's very pretty intuitive for students to go through. So I knew I was going to have some friends from the health and wellness. I know I saw a community standards friend out in the list there. So I wanted to show you just the broad overview of what content is in there currently. So our first module is introducing students to the concept of harm reduction. That's always been my first learning objective with new students, because so many of our incoming students have only received abstinence-only drug and alcohol education. So I'd like to, bring them on board of like, we're not going to tell you to not do things. We're going to give you the information so you can make the best decision for you. And we also identified the folks on campus that are the folks that, people like me, my alcohol and other drug person, that would be the person who meets with students if they get in trouble, and as well, and our community standards office. It just like, here's what these people do, this is how they support you, this is how they help you. I also am a big fan now of separating the biology from the sociology around alcohol and other drugs. So if it's like that hard science, like this is what alcohol does to your body, this is biphasic effect, alcohol poisoning, all of those things are in the module 2. That is the biology. Social and cultural stuff I put into a separate module, and this was one of the big things I have been waiting to do in a renovation, the revamping of where I had been and where I was going, and this was the opportunity to do it. So fake IDs, punch. I know some folks use jungle juice. I know there's a lot of local terms of those kinds of things. Behavior and how we act and why we act the way we do when we're drunk, binge drinking. And this is where we put a little bit about recovery community in there as well. The last 3 modules, we talk about the relationships that people have with substances. If you identify as somebody who received the Nancy Reagan Just Say No modules of drug education or the DARE, it turns out neither of those programs were evidence-based in any way to stop drug and alcohol use, but actually what they did do was were really built on systems of racism. And so there's a lot of undoing work, I think, ahead of us in the prevention world of helping people unpack that a lot of their earlier drug education was racism. So if you're looking for places where you can do your anti-racism work, substance abuse education is a really great place to do that. So we really got in there with this content to get in there. Why do people use substances? Goal setting is really important. Learning how to turn down a drink. And I was going back through there's something called the College AIM website that looks at where the best practices are right now, where the evidence base is in education. So I was kind of going through that list and like, am I missing anything? Like, what else can we plunk into this course so that we know people are saying that this content seems pretty good. We separated out and did a module of other drugs and substances. And this is where we talked about use and misuse and abuse and adaptive skills, maladaptive coping skills. New York State has a law that says we have to tell students that heroin is bad. So that information got plunked into this module. And then we also created the space for cannabis, which is another place where probably do a little work in expanding that based on what we're seeing right now with our own students here at Oneana. And then the last module, Stick to the Plan, is something that Oneana has been using for quite a while. So it's our acronym for helping students to plan a safe night out. So they have to think about the people that they're with, or the people whose house they're going to, location-based things. Do you know where you're going? Do you know how to get back to campus? Is this a place where it's going to be safe for you? Amount, which could be how much amount of substance do you want to do, but amount could be like, what are you going to do sex wise tonight or food wise tonight? All of the different, how much money do you want to spend tonight? And then notice is our bystanders, like, is everybody else having a good time or does somebody need some support? And then we just finish it out with the addiction support resources in Oneana. So these are the pages that we take students through. So they get video, the choice of video or reading. We have some practice questions at the end. And then at the end of each of these modules, students are presented with a quiz. And this is what we have to do now. So none of this, they can skip through this content. It's not like that standard, like you have to wait for the video to play before you can hit the next button. So in order to ensure that we've got student learning, so we are still checking that mandate box of saying that, yes, the college did ensure that this student was presented with this information, is it's all built into the quizzes and they have to pass the quiz. And the quizzes are based on the questions that they get in the formative assessment. So the ones that they get as practice at the bottom of each page. And then the quizzes are built out of question pool. So for example, like I said, I know that New York State has this law that we have to tell students that heroin is bad. There's 3 heroin questions on the page about heroin. And then those go into a question pool and the system will randomly choose one of those 3 heroin questions when you take your quiz. So every time you take the quiz, it's a little bit different. And here's the other brilliant thing about the OLA platform is when you're taking the questions, you can ask for hints. Like, I don't quite get what they're saying, or I don't quite understand the question. And so we have the second opportunity to educate students if they're not quite getting the point. So they can click a hint, they get a little bit more information. Click the hint again, they get even more information. So we're helping them get to the correct answer. But also every time they submit a wrong answer, we're giving them corrective feedback. So they take the quiz. There's probably, 50 to 60 questions that they're getting 10 questions out of. So if they take the quiz 10 times, they'll probably have seen them all. But even if all they do is go to the quiz and maybe they get a 60 the first time around, every time they've clicked a wrong answer, they've gotten some education to help them answer that question right in the future. So even if students figure out that they can get through in this very quick, fast way, we're still ensuring that they've been given corrective feedback to help them understand the information we want them to have. So this was all well and good. I was excited for, I knew I was going to have a lot of data. I wasn't sure what I was going to do with that data. And then we released this and, within a day or two, we had enough students through that I started to get a solid end of students. In total, I think we had, I think about 1,300 students take the class. I think this one's going to take a second to get out of my throat.
Rebecca, we do have one question. The chat says, I'm sorry if you already addressed this, but do the students complete the module every year they are registered with the college or orientation? That's from Diana.
Sure. So this is the one that we give to all incoming students at this point. My hope had always been that I could stabilize the content that we give to incoming students, because I have a little bit more help with teeth. Like the students, there's a certain percentage of students who will do something because they've been told they've been mandated to do it. But we do put a hold on student accounts that bars them for registering for the next semester at my campus. And we give them a lot of communication. We don't do it before the end of ad drop so that freshmen don't have any additional obstacles to getting their freshman year launched. But I would tell you, out of every year that I've done this, there's always 200 to 300 students in my incoming class that will not do the course until that hold is on their account. So I've been lucky to have that support from administration. And I know I'm not going to get that support on my upper level classes, but I do think having these opportunities to do additional online content. We did not push WellStart out to our freshmen, but I have offered it as an online asynchronous course for students to take. And we've gotten some students through the content that way. So I think it's that, I don't know, I have lots of ideas about where I want to grow these things. So having opportunities in education for upper class students. And I could also see where it'd be really easy. Say, these are the new things this year. Let's pull those out and make, send this out to our returning students so that they get this really quick version of that. So what you see here is what I get on the back end now. When I click in, I also get this learning dashboard icon. And it's this really nice, very quick visual, like green mean, like that big bar green means students are responding well. So that they're responding to the questions in a way that tells us they're engaging in the learning and walking away with some knowledge. And I think there's also these opportunities too, right? So like, oh, they're in the green, we're probably okay on that stuff. And, as we talk about like the reiterative, like, what do we want to do to change this to make this a better course, a more solid course for students? There's always the things that we kind of have to do. So I think serving size was one that students did pretty well on, but I feel like serving size is something that we're never going to take out of a basics around alcohol course. But I can probably play around with truncating that content since they did so well in that space. But things that really stood out to me as we got underway and we started to get student participation in here. I mean, so you can see down here, like 1385 out of 1401 students participated in the class. So 1401 was probably the number I uploaded into the system, and 1385 was the number who got that far. Is explaining how to turn down a drink has this little itty bitty sliver of green and a lot of yellow and a lot of red. We didn't do great on that. And I will also say that this is one of the things that I pulled out of that College AIM website that said, this seems to be a promising piece of content that we should be talking to students about. I decided to throw it in at kind of the last minute. So I didn't do a super great job on that content. So I think there's a both and kind of a thing for why it's not great. But interestingly, and spoiler alert, I have pushed my Spark into this platform as well. And I am having conversations with the folks at System who oversee Spark at this point about when we might transition onto this for everybody or make it an option. Affirmative consent also had like no green and a lot of red. And when you kind of live in the world of one foot in substance abuse conversations and another foot in sexual violence prevention, there are a lot of parallels, but I think this one is literally two sides of the same coin. We're talking about interpersonal communication skills that students are missing out on. And I think we've also got a lot of experience of right now on campus, knowing that our students are really lacking these skills coming out of the pandemic. And so it's like, oh, I really wish I had some like pre-pandemic information about this content, but I'll tell you the content that I put in the affirmative consent is the content that has run in my Spark class for years. And I never knew that students weren't getting it. And that was, that was a shock to the system. So what did I do with it? Because now that I know these things, and this is probably early September, that I'm looking at these kinds of data points. And so we were able to get out and use that content to drive things right away. So I have a program with my athletics, and we have peer educators within our athletics program, and they do a mentorship program within that. But one of the things they help me out with is they go out to the freshman residence halls, usually it's the first 5 Thursdays of the semester. We take one little aspect of the alcohol course and we turn it into a little tabletop game and engage students that way. And some years we hit about 1,000 kind of interactions that way. And so we immediately took out the game that we didn't think was as important because it was very fact-based, very analytical based. And we developed a game to talk about drink refusal skills so that we could get out and have another touch point with students related to that. And we just came up with a bunch of scenarios. And the goal is like, how do you refuse a drink in this scenario? Put them in little envelopes. This is a little carnival toss game that you can get from Oriental Trading for about $20 or less. And we just, we put a little stack of cards in front of each of those little kitty cats. And we said, knock down a cat and you get to answer that card to engage students in that way. And I was also going out into, the pockets on campus. So we have an EOP program on campus. We also have a college camp migrant program. So we have these spaces on campus where there's a lot more connection with freshmen. We don't have like a freshman course right now, although I think we're moving back to that. So as I'm getting invited into those spaces to have face-to-face time with students, I was redesigning and creating scenario types of conversations to have with students that would get into these spaces that I knew they were not doing as well on in the online portion. So kind of using that data to figure out what was I going to do as the fall unrolled. And another thing that we had done too is my counterpart, who is alcohol prevention person, she and I had been at a training in the spring, and like you walk out of a good training and your brain's really going. And I said, I have this, cupcake idea of, it's basically Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but we've just boiled it down to 3 levels and talking about like, if you're missing these things, if you're missing the cake, the party is how you survive. Like you're missing out on safety needs, those major ones. The frosting is, how you can, if it's the only way you know how to connect with other people is through a party environment when you're high or drunk, then that's not necessarily the best use of alcohol. But when it's kind of like the sprinkles cherry on top, it's about being, everything else is there, and this is a celebratory use. And so helping students identify, where does their use fall? Are they using alcohol as a coping skill? Or are they using it as a way to enhance the celebration? And so we had started this content, this conversation. We do a t-shirt campaign every semester on campus where we design some kind of learning education. We slap it on a t-shirt, and then we recruit 500 to 600 students to wear those shirts on campus. We give them a little education, and then we have them go out. So it's kind of a public health campaigns flipped classroom experience where we want them to talk about why this shirt's important. We talk with faculty like, hey, these shirts might show up in your classroom. Can you give that student a moment to stand up and talk about why they're wearing this shirt and what does it mean? So this was another one where we're like, all right, well, here's a weaker spot, and this is the one that needs to be part of the conversation. So we took the content out of the course and used it to drive a campaign. And actually the campaign that we did in the spring, I think, is content that will move into the course. And we talked about our phrase for the spring was the substance of you is not the substance you do. And we're talking about, for a lot of students who are using cannabis, they're very anxious students, and they don't want their friends to know how anxious they are. They want to be like the cool, laid back person. And so they're kind of hiding behind the screen of what the substance is there for them. So, this is the little dashboard I get when I go in. I click the grade book. I can see how students are progressing through the content. When in this iteration, this older platform, it did not talk to Blackboard. So I had to pull the content out of the grade book, clean it up, and upload it into Blackboard. It's about a 5-minute process that I can do while checking email and drinking coffee at this point. But in the new version, when it's on Taurus, it's gonna communicate out to your LMS. So your grade book will all be right there. So you can do all those check-ins to make sure students are progressing where they need to be. And I have worked, for those of you, SICA Center is here at Oneonta, so that our banner friends, but we do have a means of, I can send them I take the grade book out of Blackboard, I get down the list of student ID names, and we have the code script written so we can easily put holds on accounts in a pretty quick process. So it's a 15-minute tech call that I do with those folks over there. So anybody else who's using Banner, we should be able to hook you up with that part of the process as well, if that's something you're interested in. So, again, I can go through, I can get this very bird's eye view of how students are doing, but I can also dig in even deeper. So if I click in on a sub objective, I can see the number of students who took the quiz, the number of ones who took the opportunity to do the practice questions. You have to drill in a little bit, but what I can see in this, where did students make the most mistakes? I can go through and I can see what percentage of students got the question right on the first try. And then if I dig in even deeper, I can see what the what was the modal wrong answer. And this gives me the opportunity to be, well, did I just write a bad question? Because then that's on me to write a better question. Or, did I not give them enough content so they could answer that question properly? So it is this really extra, like I said, when it's designed to help us make this course better over time. The more students who participate, the better the better the feedback we get. We can go back, update the content, update the questions. And so it's this, it's designed for reiterative improvement. And so this is kind of my last slide. I totally love Star Trek. I think Star Trek is a really great example for reiterative improvement. What passed for an alien in 1960s TV special effects would never pass today, but we still have really great Star Trek that still meets its mission. It still does all of these, provides great opportunities to have conversation and explore a world that embraces diversity. So, like I said, for me, there's this, I'm still going to put time into this each year because it's an opportunity to make the course better. But I feel like where I would spend a lot of time in, like, every time I was working in Articulate Storyline, if you make a change, you have to open up the software, you make the change, even if it's just like you forgot a comma or you spelled somebody's name wrong, you have to test it in the preview, you have to export it and put it in your LMS and test it. So it took all of that out of the way. I spent a lot of time in Articulate Storyline, making sure all the accessibility functions were working properly. This platform takes care of all of that for me. It's ready to go with everything we need to be, to meet our ADA guidelines, to meet WCAG guidelines. So, what will change out of the current version as we move into the next version, certainly about cannabis and vape use, as we learn more on that and see how that's impacting our student body. The BORGs, which actually stands out for Blackout Rage Gallon, for those of you who that's a new term for, where we use, like right now, my serving size, I have the picture of the red Solo cup, and I'm like, oh, we're just going to have to also add our 1 gallon jug information into that space. So where I'm at this point, I've worked with students, again, it's a really great opportunity to work with interns, and seniors really like to have this opportunity to kind of give education back to their freshman self. And it seems to be a very cathartic opportunity for interns in their senior year of going through the content. What do I like? What do I don't like? Looking at the questions. There's a lot of question writing, and I was doing it in a very quick, with less time than I would like to do. So making sure all of those things are there. And yeah, so what my plan is at this point is we will be redoing video. I did give permission for them to create a copy for folks to experience. We did this with shoestring and duct tape, and I took advantage of the fact that my orientation leaders had a couple of free hours, and we did a lot of videos with cell phones and our orientation leaders, and did it really cheap and on the fly. There's a lot of videos of me because I was like at the last minute, I was like, oh, and we also need a video for this, and we also need a video for that. So we'll be going through making sure that we have an Oneana version and a non-Oneana version, or flagging stuff that we think, hey, you probably want to have like a little localized version of these kinds of things. But again, if you can edit a PowerPoint slide, this is pretty simple stuff to do. And my thought is we'll have some webinars to help you all out, learning how to edit text and edit questions and upload a different YouTube link. And these are all skills I believe in you all to have. And that's where we're at. That's how we'll be spending. Once I finish Sexual Assault Awareness Month, which is April, we'll be going into video mode and updating Party Science. So, and those of you who are interested in being a part of the conversation, I would welcome you to, reach out, and, we could have a conversation about some of the language. Maybe you all have some ideas of things that you'd like to see in there. But if you are a SUNY campus, you have access to the OLI stuff for free. So that's really like the long and short of it, is like, it's free. And you'll have really great data to drive what you're doing the rest of the year based on all of it. And I will now be quiet and see if you got any questions. I will turn off my screen share.
Thanks, Rebecca. And just to add one more time, Rebecca mentioned that this is specific to Oneonta, but we will have a more general version of this available in the catalog. We're thinking June or July. We will reach out to all of you to let you know when that will be ready for the catalog. Certainly, we intend to have it ready to go for you before the fall semester begins. So we'll keep you apprised of that. As Rebecca also mentioned, anything on the SUNY catalog, oer.suny.edu, again, is available to you and your students at no cost. Even though this content is not yet on the catalog, you might be able to get a sneak peek of it, I think, what Rebecca's got. So when you fill out that form, if you choose to do so, there's an other box. So just check that other box and just acknowledge that you attended this webinar and you just kind of want to take a look at that content. And again, once it's ready to go, we'll make sure that we alert you to that. Are there any other questions? All right. We'll give you back maybe 8 or 9 minutes of your day. We appreciate everyone being here. Again, look for a follow-up email from us. We appreciate you taking time out to be with us. Thanks so much, Rebecca, for your time and sharing your experience with the process. And we look forward to hearing from any of you at any time if you have any questions. Thanks again.
What terrific information. Thank you for that.
Thanks, Lynn.
And before Corey signs off, happy special day.
Thanks, Lynn Ann.
All right, I will end the recording. And we'll send you that link when it is available, Tony.
Perfect. Thanks so much.